Hi everyone, in this tutorial I'm going to share with you a few top tips for drawing realism in graphite. Now the first thing that I like to do is get a good base foundation in place using graphite powder. Now to apply this graphite powder I am using an eye makeup applicator, and all I'm doing here is just hinting at where my main lights and darks are. Now it doesn't matter if I'm drawing fur, feathers, flowers, whatever it may be, I do like to make sure that I've got this mapped in at this first stage. The second stage is where I'm now going to start to break that up into small, manageable sections. So this is where I'm using a graphite pencil just to map in the main shapes, in this case the butterfly's wing, to make it a bit easier to mentally process. It's very easy to become stressed with any element that we're working on if we do end up working in too much of a larger section. So I do like to break that up into nice, manageable chunks. Now my next tip for building up more of that realism is using good shading techniques. Now what I'm using here is just a bit more of a blunter pencil to apply more of a smoother layer of graphite in areas where I want to reinforce my contrast. Now contrast is your values, your lights and your darks. So you can see here I'm starting to use a range of graphite pencils ranging from HB all the way up to 9B, and I'm really just gradually reinforcing where my darker values are. Now it is important when you're using the pencils to shade like this that you have a flat or a blunt point to your pencil. You don't want to have a sharper pencil tip because you will then end up creating scribbly movements or harsher lines. So it's very important here to work with a blunt pencil. Now what I'm doing here as well is using a range of pencils starting from a HB and eventually if needed working all the way up to a 9B. But what's very important here, as you can see, is I'm not jumping to my darkest pencils first. I'm building up all of these values gradually. Now another big tip here when working with your pencils in this way is you don't want to be applying too much pressure to your graphite pencils. If you have a tendency to do that, you're going to flatten the tooth of the paper, which is going to limit how many layers you can add on top. Now one thing that we're going to get to at the end of this video is the use of erasers to remove that graphite from the paper. Now the one thing that I talk about in all of my in-depth real-time tutorials on Patreon is how to use a Tombow mono eraser, which is this here, in order to get those nice fine highlights. Now if the graphite powder or graphite pencils is applied in the wrong way, then the Tombow mono eraser here has a very difficult time in removing that graphite. So you could potentially be using that eraser and not finding that it's working. It's not necessarily the razor that's at fault, it's potentially how the graphite has been applied. Now at this stage here, I've got a really nice realistic look being built up here, but I need to reinforce my contrast. So this is where I'll go back in with my darker pencils and then again my erasers to reinforce the values and the contrast. Now the erasers that I like to use, they range depending on the type of effect that I'm creating. Here I'm using a combination of the Tombow mono eraser and also the erasing shield. Now what I want to be doing here is just making sure that I've got everything where I want it. My proportions are right, my values are correct, and then I can focus on those details. So this here is a photo of the finished drawing, and I really do hope that these few quick tips here have been useful and that they help to bring more realism to your graphite pieces. If you've got any art related questions, feel free to pop them in the comments below because I'm more than happy to help if I can. And if you are interested in drawing along to the real-time version of this tutorial, then I'll link all of my Patreon in the description below. If you did find this video helpful, I would really appreciate it if you could give it a like and a thumbs up. It makes a huge difference to my channel. And I also upload a couple of videos to YouTube every week, so if you would like to get notified of that content, then don't forget to hit the subscribe and the bell button. As always, thank you so much for watching.